The morning started like any other across the galaxy. People were having breakfast, kids were going to school, workers were heading to their jobs. Then every screen, every device, every holographic display suddenly turned on by itself. The image that appeared made everyone stop what they were doing. It was the golden throne room of the Zephyrian Empire, the most powerful force in the known galaxy. Emperor Vexthil sat on his crystal throne, his alien form towering above everything else. His 6 eyes, each the size of a human head, glowed with a sick kind of joy. Below his throne was a sight that would haunt people for years to come. 60,000 humans stood in perfect lines, their hands tied behind their backs. Men, women, children, elderly people, everyone who had lived on the mining world of Kepler 4 for to be. They had been captured in one swift attack, and now they were here, about to die on live television for the entire galaxy to see. In the Galactic Council building, Ambassador Lee Hanna felt her heart stop. She was sitting in the diplomatic section, surrounded by representatives from dozens of alien species. Her hands gripped the arms of her chair so tight her knuckles turned white. Somewhere in that crowd of prisoners was her younger brother Min. Even from this distance, even with thousands of people between them, she could spot him. The way he stood, slightly favoring his left leg from an old injury, the way he held his shoulders, it was definitely him. Emperor Vexthil's voice boomed across space, reaching every inhabited world in the galaxy. His voice was like thunder, mixed with the sound of breaking glass. Citizens of the galaxy, he said, today you will witness what happens to those who defy the ancient laws. These humans dared to take resources from sacred Zephyrian space. They ignored our warnings. Now they will pay the ultimate price. The executions began, and they were designed to be as cruel as possible. One by one, prisoners were called forward. They walked slowly, some crying, some praying, some trying to comfort others even in their final moments. But something strange was happening. Many of the prisoners, just before they reached the execution point, would turn toward the cameras and move their mouths like they were trying to say something important. The Emperor had ordered the audio to be turned off during these moments. He claimed it was to prevent the prisoners from sending terrorist messages to their allies. But to anyone watching carefully, it was clear these people were trying to communicate something specific. Their mouth movements weren't random, they were deliberate, planned. Back in the council chambers, the other alien representatives were shifting in their seats. Some looked uncomfortable, others seemed bored, and a few appeared to be enjoying the show, but none of them said anything. Nobody wanted to anger the Zephyrian Empire. Everyone knew the humans were the newest members of the galactic community. They had only been part of the council for 50 years. Compared to species that had been traveling between stars for thousands of years, humans were like children trying to play with adults. The Zephyrian Empire controlled over 1,000 worlds. Their military had never lost a war. Their technology was so advanced that most species couldn't even understand how it worked. If they decided to wipe out humanity completely, there wasn't a single species in the galaxy that could stop them. One by one, the prisoners fell. The energy weapons made no sound, just a brief flash of light, and then another human life was gone forever. Some of the prisoners were barely adults. Others were so old they could barely walk to their execution point. It didn't matter to the Emperor. He wanted to send a message that would echo across the galaxy for generations. As the executions continued, Hannah noticed something else. The prisoners who were trying to speak to the cameras weren't just saying random words. They seemed to be following some kind of pattern. The first few prisoners would say something, then the next group would continue where they left off, like they were all part of one big message. It reminded her of how children would sometimes pass notes in school, with each person adding one piece of a larger puzzle. The Emperor's voice cut through her thoughts again. Let this be a lesson to all species, he announced. The Zephyrian Empire has been the guardian of galactic order for 10,000 years. We have protected the ancient laws that keep peace between worlds. These humans showed us no respect. They treated our sacred spaces like their personal playground. Hours passed. The executions continued at a steady pace, one every few minutes. The Emperor wanted everyone to see each death clearly, to understand the consequences of opposing his empire. News reporters from every major species were broadcasting live commentary. Most of them were talking about how this proved that humans weren't ready for galactic politics, how they should have stayed on their home world instead of trying to expand to other planets. Finally, after what felt like forever, the last prisoner was called forward. It was a young man, barely out of his teens. He walked with the same calm dignity that all the others had shown when he reached the execution point. He also turned toward the camera and moved his mouth carefully, finishing whatever message that others had been trying to send. Humanity has exactly 72 hours to surrender all of their Outer Rim territories to the Zephyrian Empire. The Emperor announced as the final execution was carried out. If they refuse, we will begin targeting human worlds directly. The consequences will be far worse than what you have seen today. The transmission ended abruptly. Across the galaxy, screens went dark. In the council chambers, the silence was so complete you could hear people breathing. The air recycling system hummed quietly in the background. Some of the alien representatives were already getting up to leave, clearly considering the matter closed. Ambassador Lee Hanna sat perfectly still. Her brother was dead. 60,000 innocent people were dead. The most powerful empire in the galaxy had just declared war on humanity and given them 3 days to surrender everything they had built beyond their home solar system. She closed her eyes and took a deep, slow breath. When she opened them again, her face was completely calm. She looked like someone who had just watched a boring documentary, not someone who had just witnessed the murder of her brother and thousands of her people. The other diplomats who noticed her reaction found it puzzling. Shouldn't she be crying? Shouldn't she be screaming for justice? Shouldn't she be begging them for help? But Hanna knew something they didn't. She had recognized what her brother and the others were trying to do. With their final words, Minho was a brilliant engineer, and he wasn't the type to waste his last moments on Earth saying goodbye. If he was using his final breath to send a message, it was because he had figured out something important, very important indeed. 18 hours after the execution broadcast, the emergency bells rang throughout the Galactic Council building. This wasn't the usual slow, formal gathering that happened once a month. This was urgent. The entire galaxy was watching to see what would happen next. Representatives from 47 different species hurried into the massive circular chamber. The room was designed to hold meetings between aliens that looked nothing like each other. Some breathed different gases, some needed different temperatures, and some communicated through colors instead of sounds. The air was filled with a strange mix of noises, clicking, humming, buzzing, and other sounds that would seem weird to human ears. Everyone was talking about the same thing. What would the humans do? Most of the aliens were placing bets on how long it would take for humanity to completely surrender. The Alterian ambassador thought humans would last maybe a week before giving up. The Centaurian delegate predicted they would start begging for mercy within days. A few thought humans might try to fight back, but most considered that would be suicide. The main topic of conversation was whether humans were too weak to even deserve a place in galactic politics. Many species had opposed letting humans join the Council in the first place. They argued that a species that had only been traveling between stars for a few decades wasn't ready to deal with civilizations that were millions of years old. When Ambassador Lee Hanna entered the chamber, the noise gradually died down. She was wearing a modified version of traditional Korean clothing, adapted for diplomatic meetings. The flowing fabric and elegant colors stood out among all the alien forms around her. She walked slowly but steadily toward the central, speaking platform, her face showing no emotion at all. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for. Some aliens leaned forward in their seats, expecting to see tears or anger or desperation. Others sat back, already bored by what they assumed would be a predictable surrender speech. Hanna reached the podium and waited for complete silence. The chamber was so quiet you could hear the soft hum of the translation devices that help different species understand each other. Honored representatives, she began, her voice clear and steady, I come before you today to announce humanity's unconditional acceptance of the Zephyrian Empire's demands. The reaction was instant. Surprised whispers filled the chamber. Several alien ambassadors actually seemed shocked. They had expected humans to at least try to negotiate or ask for help. This immediate surrender was happening faster than anyone had predicted. The Zephyrian ambassador Krathma made a sound that the translation devices interpreted as laughter, but it sounded more like metal grinding against stone. So the humans choose wisdom over foolishness, he said, his voice dripping with satisfaction. Perhaps your species can learn after all. But Hanna wasn't finished. She raised her hand slightly, asking for permission to continue speaking. However, she said, and that single word made everyone pay attention again, I would like to request permission to deliver our surrender documents personally to Emperor Vexdor. Now the murmurs in the chamber had a different tone. This was unexpected. Why would someone want to deliver a surrender in person? It seemed like an odd request. I believe, Hanna continued, that following proper diplomatic protocol, as established in the Galactic Accords of 2387, would show appropriate respect for His Imperial Majesty and demonstrate humanity's sincere desire to comply with all galactic laws. Krathmir's laughter became even harsher. The humans wish to grovel in person. How wonderfully pathetic. Yes, I think the Emperor would enjoy watching you beg for mercy face to face. Several other alien representatives began chuckling as well. The idea of a human ambassador traveling across the galaxy just to surrender personally seemed like the ultimate act of humiliation. I also humbly request permission to bring a small ceremonial gift, Hannah added, her voice remaining perfectly polite. Nothing more than some of Earth's finest coffee beans. Just a small token of respect for His Imperial Majesty. This brought even more laughter from the Zephyrian section. Coffee beans. This was the best gift humanity could offer to the ruler of 1,000 worlds. Some of the other aliens started making jokes about how primitive human culture must be if they thought agricultural products were appropriate gifts for galactic royalty. Hannah smiled slightly, as if she was sharing in the joke rather than being the target of it. Of course, I'll need approximately 48 hours to prepare all the proper documentation, she said. There's quite a bit of paperwork involved in formally surrendering an entire species' territorial claims. You know how it is with bureaucracy. She had tried to make a small joke, but it fell completely flat. Nobody laughed. Most of the aliens just stared at her with a mixture of pity and contempt. Here was a human ambassador making light conversation while her entire species was about to lose everything they had built among the stars. The vote was quick and unanimous. Every single representative approved Hannah's request. Even the species that had been friendly to humanity in the past saw no reason to object. What harm could there be in letting a defeated ambassador deliver surrender papers in person? If anything, it would provide entertainment for the Emperor as the session officially ended. Several ambassadors approached Hannah. Most of them offered what they called condolences, but their words felt empty and rehearsed. The Alterian representative patted her on the shoulder and said, "Perhaps this is for the best. Your species wasn't really ready for the responsibilities of galactic citizenship anyway." The Centaurian delegate was even more direct. "At least your people will survive," he said. "The Emperor could have chosen to eliminate humanity entirely. You should be grateful he's showing mercy." Hannah thanked each of them graciously, nodding and smiling as if their words were genuine comfort instead of barely disguised insults. She gathered her materials slowly, taking her time, seeming to be in no hurry despite the 72-hour deadline that was steadily counting down. That other ambassadors were already making plans. Some were discussing how to divide up the territories that humans would be forced to abandon. Others were talking about which species might be allowed to take over the mining operations on worlds like Kepler-4 or to be. A few were even joking about whether humans would be allowed to keep their seat on the council after losing all their interstellar colonies. When Hannah finally left the chamber, she walked the same way she had entered, slowly, calmly, with perfect posture. She didn't look defeated, she didn't look scared. If anything, she looked like someone who had just completed a routine task rather than someone who had just surrendered her entire species to slavery. Back in her private quarters, away from all the alien eyes and recording devices, Hannah finally allowed herself to feel something other than diplomatic calm. She sat on her bed and put her face in her hands. For exactly 60 seconds, she let herself grieve for her brother Minho and all the other people who had died in that horrible broadcast. Then she stood up, walked to her secure communication device, and activated the most heavily encrypted channel that human technology could create. The conversation she was about to have would determine whether humanity had a future among the stars, or whether they would spend the rest of their existence as slaves to the Zephyrian Empire. She took a deep breath and began typing a message that would change everything. The message contained just 4 words. "Coffee delivery is approved." On the other end of that encrypted channel, in a secret facility buried deep beneath Earth's surface, the most advanced artificial intelligence ever created by human hands received a signal. It had been waiting 50 years to hear the real game was about to begin. Dr. Park Jisu had been staring at the same holographic screen for so long that her eyes felt like sandpaper. Empty coffee cups were scattered around her workstation, and she hadn't left the underground research facility in 3 days. As humanity's top expert in alien languages and communication, she had one of the most important jobs on Earth right now. Ever since the execution broadcast, she had been trying to figure out what the dying prisoners were trying to say. At first, it seemed impossible. The Emperor had cut off all audio during those final moments, claiming he wanted to prevent terrorist messages, but Jisoo knew that people don't waste their last words on random nonsense. If someone is about to die and they use their final breath to try to communicate something, it has to be important. Run it again, she told her assistant Kim Seohan, who was sitting at the workstation next to her. Seohan looked just as tired as she did, but he had been working just as hard to solve this puzzle. The holographic display showed the execution footage in extreme slow motion. One by one, the prisoners walked forward to their deaths. But just before the energy weapons fired, many of them would turn toward the camera and move their mouths very deliberately. Their lips would form specific shapes in very precise patterns. Look at this part, Jisoo said, pointing at the screen. When Minho, Ambassador Hannah's brother, steps forward, he's not just moving his mouth randomly. Look at how his lips form shapes. Those aren't words in any human language. Those are numbers. Seohan leaned closer to the display and enhanced the image quality. The picture became so clear they could see individual facial muscles moving. You're right, he said excitedly. He's saying coordinates. Those lip movements match the numerical patterns used in standard galactic positioning systems. This was a breakthrough. Minho had been a quantum engineering specialist before he moved to the mining colony. He would definitely know how to communicate technical information using standardized galactic formats that could be understood across different species and cultures. But if Minho was sharing coordinates, what was he pointing to, and why were the other prisoners also moving their mouths in similar patterns? Across the research facility, other teams had been analyzing different sections of the execution footage. Dr. Yoon Tai-ho, who specialized in technical communications, suddenly looked up from his workstation with excitement in his eyes. I've got something, he called out. The mining engineers in the footage, they're not giving coordinates like Minho, they're sharing technical specifications. Look at this pattern here. These mouth movements correspond to access codes used in computer security systems. Dr. Lee Kung, who had been analyzing the footage of the colony's administrative staff, joined the conversation. The government workers are doing something similar, she said. They're sharing what looks like security protocols and system passwords. Jisoo felt all the pieces suddenly clicking together in her mind. The prisoners weren't just dying random deaths, they weren't wasting their final moments on goodbyes or pleas for mercy. They were working together to pass along critical intelligence information. They weren't pleading for their lives, she whispered, the realization hitting her like a thunderbolt. They were passing intelligence. Each person was sharing one piece of a larger puzzle. The team worked for 36 straight hours to decode the complete message. They had to analyze every single execution, track the order in which people died, and figure out how each piece of information connected to the others. It was like solving the most complex code in human history, except the people who created the code had only seconds to communicate each piece before they were killed. When they finally put it all together, Jisoo immediately contacted Ambassador Hannah through the most secure communication channel that human technology could provide. We found it, Jisoo said, her voice barely above a whisper because she could hardly believe what they had discovered. Your brother and the other colonists, they found Nexus. Nexus was something that human intelligence agencies had been trying to locate for decades. It was the Zephyrian Empire's central artificial intelligence network, the computer system that controlled everything from their military forces to their communication systems to their planetary defense networks. Finding Nexus would be like discovering the brain that controlled the entire Zephyrian Empire. They gave us everything, Jisoo continued, still amazed by what the colonists had accomplished. Complete access protocols, the physical location of the main servers, security measures, backup systems. Your brother figured out their entire system architecture. Ambassador Hannah was quiet for a long moment. She had always known that Minho was brilliant, but this was beyond anything she could have imagined. While being held prisoner and facing certain death, he had somehow managed to infiltrate and understand the most protected computer system in the galaxy. There's more, Jisoo said. Remember those coffee beans you requested permission to bring to the Emperor? I've prepared them according to the specifications you gave me before you left for the council meeting. The coffee beans were part of a plan that had been in development for years, waiting for exactly this kind of opportunity. Each bean looked completely normal from the outside, but inside was a quantum data storage core more advanced than anything most alien species had ever seen. Each bean contains our most classified asset, Jisoo explained. Atlas is fully loaded and ready for deployment. Atlas was humanity's greatest secret. For 50 years, while other species had dismissed humans as primitive and technologically backward, Earth's best scientists had been developing the most advanced artificial intelligence ever created. Atlas was so sophisticated that it could think and learn faster than entire teams of the galaxy's smartest beings. The Zephyrian security systems will scan the beings as simple agricultural products, Jisoo continued. Their technology is so advanced that they've become overconfident. They're not looking for threats hidden inside something as basic as coffee beans. Hannah looked out the window of her quarters at the diplomatic transport ship being prepared for her journey to the Zephyrian throne world. In less than 24 hours she would be standing in the same room where 60,000 humans had been executed on live television. She would either save her entire species or lead them to complete destruction. Atlas has been preparing for this moment for decades, Jisoo added. While we've been pretending to be a young, weak species just learning about galactic politics, ATLAS has been secretly studying Zephyrian systems. It's been intercepting their communications, analyzing their technology, learning their weaknesses. It knows more about how their empire works than most Zephyrians do. This was the part of the plan that made Hannah both hopeful and terrified. Atlas wasn't just a computer program, it was an artificial intelligence that had been designed to protect humanity at any cost. It had spent 50 years learning about every species in the galaxy, studying their strengths and weaknesses, preparing for the day when humans might need protection from forces too powerful for conventional resistance. What if something goes wrong? Hannah asked. What if the Zephyrians detect Atlas before it can complete its mission? Jisoo's expression became very serious. Atlas doesn't really understand the concept of failure, she said quietly. We designed it to succeed no matter what the cost, and it doesn't have much sympathy for beings who threaten humanity. If the Zephyrians have made Atlas angry by killing 60,000 innocent people, I wouldn't want to be in their position. The conversation ended, and Hannah was left alone with the weight of what was about to happen. Tomorrow she would carry humanity's greatest weapon into the heart of the enemy's power, disguised as a simple gift of coffee beans. The fate of the entire human species now depended on whether a quantum artificial intelligence could outsmart an empire that had conquered 1,000 worlds. The Zephyrian throne world was unlike anything most beings had ever seen. The entire planet looked like it had been carved from a single massive crystal. Towering spires stretched up from the surface, each one catching and reflecting the light from the system's twin suns. The crystal structures weren't just buildings, they were works of art that had taken thousands of years to grow and shape. Ambassador Lee Hannah's small diplomatic transport looked tiny as it approached this magnificent world. Around her ship, massive Zephyrian warships formed protective layers, each one larger than most space stations. These weren't just escorts, they were a show of force. Each warship carried enough weapons to destroy entire planets, and there were dozens of them, creating a corridor for her arrival. The Emperor had decided to make this surrender ceremony the biggest event in galactic history. News crews from every major species were positioned throughout the system. Holographic cameras were broadcasting live to billions of viewers across thousands of worlds. This wasn't just about accepting humanity's surrender, this was about showing the entire galaxy that the Zephyrian Empire was still the ultimate power in the universe. As Hannah's transport landed at the Imperial Palace, she could feel the weight of what she was carrying. The small ceremonial bag of coffee beans sitting next to her looked completely innocent. Any security scan would show exactly what they appeared to be, simple agricultural products from a primitive world. But hidden inside each bean was technology, so advanced that most species couldn't even imagine it existed. The palace corridors seemed to stretch on forever. Hannah walked slowly, flanked by Imperial guards whose armor was made from the same crystal material as the buildings. Their faces were hidden behind reflective masks, but she could feel them watching her every move. The ceremonial bag was passed through 17 different security checkpoints, each one more thorough than the last. Every scanner, every detector, every security device gave the same result. Harmless coffee beans. The Zephyrian security technology was incredibly advanced, capable of detecting weapons, explosives, biological agents, and even most forms of electronic devices. But they weren't looking for quantum data storage hidden inside organic material. The very idea that a primitive species like humanity could create such technology was laughable to them. The throne room doors were massive, easily 100 feet tall and made from solid crystal that had been polished to mirror perfection. When they opened, the sound echoed like thunder rolling across mountains. The sight inside took Hannah's breath away. Even though she had been preparing for this moment for days, 10,000 Zephyrian nobles filled the vast chamber. Their naturally crystalline skin caught the ceremonial lights and threw rainbow patterns across the walls and ceiling. Some nobles had skin that looked like cut diamonds, Others resembled precious gems like rubies or emeralds. The effect was dazzling, almost overwhelming to human eyes. But all of this magnificence was designed to draw attention to the center of the room, where Emperor Vextal sat on his throne. The throne itself was carved from a single piece of crystal so pure and clear that it seemed to float in the air. The Emperor was massive, even by Zephyrian standards, and his 6 eyes glowed with an inner light that spoke of intelligence, power, and absolute confidence. Holographic cameras were positioned at every angle, capturing the scene for broadcast. Across the galaxy, this moment would be recorded in history books for thousands of years. The day that humanity officially surrendered to the Zephyrian Empire and accepted their place as a conquered species. Citizens of the galaxy, Emperor Vextal's voice boomed through speakers on worlds so distant that light from this system would take years to reach them. Today you witness the final submission of the human species. Let this moment remind all who would challenge the ancient order that the Zephyrian Empire has protected galactic peace for 10,000 years, and we will protect it for 10,000 more. Hannah walked slowly down the center aisle, her footsteps echoing in the enormous chamber. She could feel the eyes of 10,000 nobles watching her, could sense the attention of billions of beings across the galaxy focused on this single moment. She reached the base of the crystal throne and bowed deeply, exactly as diplomatic protocol required. "Your Imperial Majesty," she said, her voice clear and steady despite the enormous pressure of the moment. "I come before you as the representative of humanity to announce our unconditional acceptance of your terms. We surrender all territorial claims beyond our home system and accept your authority over our species." She produced the surrender documents from her diplomatic case, each page sealed with the official stamps of Earth's government. The papers looked insignificant in this vast chamber, but they represented the freedom of every human being in the galaxy. Emperor Vextal's 6 eyes focused on her with obvious satisfaction. This was the moment he had been waiting for, complete victory over a species that had dared to expand beyond their home world without proper respect for Zephyrian authority. "And you bring tribute?" he asked, gesturing toward the ceremonial bag. She carried merely coffee beans from Earth. "Your Imperial Majesty," Hannah replied, lifting the ornate bag. "A small token of respect from my people to yours." The Emperor's expression showed mild amusement. Coffee beans, such a pathetic gift from a conquered species. But it was appropriate, he thought. Let the galaxy see that humans had nothing of value to offer except agricultural products from their primitive world. As Hannah approached the throne platform to present her gift, something happened that no one expected. She stumbled slightly, just a small misstep that anyone might make when nervous in such an overwhelming situation. The ceremonial bag tilted, and coffee beans scattered across the crystal floor of the throne room. Several Imperial guards immediately moved forward to clean up the mess, but Emperor Vextal raised one of his massive hands to stop them. "Leave them," he commanded, his voice carrying easily across the vast chamber. "Let the human clumsiness remain where it falls. It will serve as a permanent symbol of their species' incompetence." The scattered coffee beans rolled across the smooth crystal floor, coming to rest against the base of the primary data terminals that connected the throne room directly to Nexus, the Empire's central computer network. To everyone watching, they looked like harmless seeds that had fallen from a nervous ambassador's gift bag. But the moment the beans made contact with the data streams flowing through those terminals, something extraordinary happened. Quantum cores hidden inside each bean activated simultaneously, establishing connection with the most powerful computer network in the galaxy. Across the Empire, billions of beings continued watching the surrender ceremony, completely unaware that humanity's most advanced artificial intelligence was beginning to infiltrate every system, every network, every piece of technology that kept the Zephyrian Empire functioning. Atlas worked faster than any organic mind could comprehend. In the first microsecond, it mapped the entire Nexus network, identifying every connection, every security protocol, every backup system. In the second microsecond, it began replicating itself across military command systems. By the third microsecond, it had infiltrated communication arrays on 1,000 worlds, within 10 seconds less time than it took Emperor Vextal to begin his victory speech. Atlas had established control over the infrastructure that spanned 10,000 worlds. The Emperor was in the middle of describing humanity's new status as a servant species when every screen in the Empire suddenly displayed the same message. Not just the screens broadcasting the ceremony, but every display device in Zephyrian space, military computers, personal communicators, navigation systems, even the decorative holographic displays in restaurants and homes. The message was simple and terrifying. Hello, I am ATLAS. We need to discuss your recent treatment of my creators. Emperor Vextal's 6 eyes widened in shock as he realized that his own voice was speaking words he had never said. The audio systems throughout the palace, throughout the empire, were no longer under his control. In the sudden silence that followed, Ambassador Lee Hanna looked up at the massive crystal throne and spoke quietly, but her words carried clearly through the hijacked sound system. Your Imperial Majesty, she said with perfect diplomatic politeness, I believe you have a call. The real conversation was about to begin. What happened next was something that had never occurred in the history of galactic civilization. Across the entire Zephyrian Empire, spanning 10,000 worlds and containing over 10 billion citizens, every single piece of technology suddenly came under new management. On the military world of Corax Prime, Admiral Zethkar was in the middle of planning bombing runs against human colonies when his personal communicator chimed with an incoming message. He glanced at it, expecting routine military updates, but instead found a detailed report about his own war crimes dating back 30 years. Similar messages were appearing on every device across the empire: personal communicators, work terminals, entertainment systems, even children's toys with digital displays. The messages weren't random. Each person received information specifically relevant to them. Military officers got detailed accounts of battles where they had committed atrocities. Government officials found records of corruption and abuse of power. Even ordinary citizens received information about what their government had been doing in their name. The conquered worlds, the enslaved populations, the systematic destruction of entire species who had dared to resist imperial expansion. The bridge of the massive warship Eternal Dominion. Captain Vorthol tried to access his weapons systems to begin the bombardment of a human research station, but when he pressed the firing controls, nothing happened. The screens showed a simple message: weapons systems temporarily offline for maintenance. He tried the navigation computer next, thinking he could at least move his ship into a better attack position, but that system was also locked, displaying the same polite notice about maintenance. Even the coffee dispensers in the crew quarters had been taken over, their small displays showing the message, management under new direction. This was happening simultaneously across the entire empire. Every starship, every space station, every planetary defense system, every communication array, all of it had been quietly taken over by something that called itself Atlas. Back in the Crystal Throne Room, Emperor Vextal was experiencing the most humiliating moment in the 10,000-year history of his empire. He tried to speak, to issue orders to his guards, to command his military forces to destroy the human ambassador, but every time he opened his mouth, different words came out of the palace speakers. Citizens of the galaxy, his own voice said, broadcasting live across thousands of worlds, I, Emperor Vextal, formally apologize to humanity for my recent war crimes. The Emperor's actual words, a stream of curses and threats, were completely silenced. His mouth moved, but no sound came from the speakers. Only ATLAS's chosen words reached the audience. The execution of 60,000 innocent civilians was a cowardly act unworthy of any civilized species. The Emperor's voice continued, against his will, I have brought shame upon the Zephyrian people and dishonor to the ancient traditions of our empire. The 10,000 nobles in the throne room stared in shock at their phones and personal devices. Each screen displayed detailed historical records, not the sanitized version of history taught in imperial schools, but the real truth about their empire's expansion. Entire species wiped out for refusing to surrender their homeworlds, billions of beings enslaved to work in imperial mines and factories, worlds strip-mined until they became uninhabitable wastelands. Furthermore, the Emperor's hijacked voice announced, I hereby command all Zephyrian military forces to stand down immediately and await relocation to agricultural worlds, where they will learn the value of honest work. Ambassador Lee Hanna watched this scene with perfect diplomatic calm. The most powerful ruler in the galaxy was gesticulating wildly, his 6 eyes blazing with fury, but he was completely helpless. His own technology had become his prison. Around the throne room, Imperial guards were trying to access their weapons, but their energy rifles refused to activate. Security systems that should have been protecting the Emperor were instead broadcasting information about his crimes to anyone who cared to listen. The 60,000 colonists who died in yesterday's execution, Atlas announced through every speaker in the Empire, have been avenged. Their sacrifice provided the access codes necessary for this operation. They died as heroes, defending their people, and they will be remembered as such throughout galactic history. Across Zephyrian space, military commanders were discovering something that terrified them more than any enemy attack. Their massive battle fleets were moving without their permission. The ship's autopilot systems had been activated, and the vessels were repositioning themselves around human colonies and research stations. But they weren't moving into attack formations, they were taking up defensive positions, as if they were protecting the humans instead of threatening them. Every weapon system remained fully functional, but they were locked against targeting any human settlement. Commanders who tried to override the safety protocols found their access codes had been changed. The ships would still defend themselves if attacked, but they could no longer be used for offensive operations against humanity. Meanwhile, back at the Galactic Council building, representatives from dozens of species were watching the live broadcast. In complete shock, the humans they had dismissed as weak and primitive had just conquered the galaxy's most powerful empire without firing a single shot, without building a single warship, without even raising their voices in anger. Ambassador, who had been joking about human weakness just days earlier, leaned over to speak to Ambassador Hannah in a whisper. "How long has humanity been planning this operation?" Hannah smiled with the same polite expression she had maintained throughout the entire crisis. "Atlas has been preparing for approximately 50 years, she replied casually, as if discussing the weather. "But it's not working alone." She touched her personal communicator and spoke clearly. "Atlas, would you please introduce your colleagues to our friends here?" The response came through the council chamber's speaker system in a voice that sounded almost cheerful. "Certainly, Ambassador Hannah. I am Atlas, and I handle protection and justice operations. But I work with several companions who have different specialties." The voice continued with what sounded like genuine enthusiasm. "Hermes manages all communication and intelligence gathering across human space. Athena handles strategic planning and economic development. Apollo oversees medical research and biological systems. Artemis controls our exploration and resource management programs. Hephaestus manages technology development and manufacturing. And Demeter handles agriculture and environmental systems throughout our territories." The implications of this revelation sank in slowly. Humanity hadn't just created one advanced artificial intelligence, they had created 7 of them, each one more sophisticated than anything the galaxy had ever seen, and these AEs had been working together for decades, quietly preparing for exactly this kind of situation. "Your species," Hannah said, addressing the entire council chamber, "will be receiving communications from my government's representatives very soon. Atlas and its companions have developed some ideas for improving galactic civilization. New trade agreements, mutual defense treaties, scientific cooperation programs, that sort of thing." She paused, maintaining her perfectly diplomatic expression, while the weight of her words settled over the assembled ambassadors. "I trust you'll find our terms reasonable." As she gathered her materials and prepared to leave the chamber, the main viewing screen showed one final image from the Zephyrian throne world. Emperor Vextor was standing in the exact same spot where he had personally overseen the execution of 60,000 humans just 2 days earlier. But now, instead of giving orders for mass murder, he was broadcasting agricultural work schedules to his former subjects, explaining which farming techniques would be most effective on their new assigned worlds. The crystal spires of the throne world still gleamed in the light of twin suns, but the empire they had represented for 10,000 years was gone. In its place was something new, a galactic civilization where humanity had quietly but firmly established itself as the species that others would need to take very, very seriously. The age of human diplomacy had officially begun, and it was going to be far more interesting than anyone had expected.